G'day everyone, welcome to the Outback Packers podcast, the podcast where two mates from all the way across the world have a yarn talking Packers football and the green and gold. I'm Nick Gregory, joined as always by my co-host Joe Pearson, take a look at the Packers off-season plans and sneak a peek at the upcoming Rams game. But before we start, let's welcome on very special guest, writer for Packer Report, co-host of Packer Day, and the godfather of GameOn Wisconsin, Jacob Westendorf. How are you, Jacob?
You like
Quite
that
an
one,
intro.
didn't you?
That was quite an intro. I appreciate that. Let me real quick. Let me go shave real fast. I get one of them really thin mustaches like the Godfather. But yeah, no, I appreciate the welcome. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you guys having me back after last week's little hiccup. So we'll call it a bye.
We weren't going to
for
talk
everyone.
about that one.
All good.
No, we appreciate you coming on at this late hour. So, not a lot of people are up this time. So we appreciate you sacrificing.
Never too late to talk about the Green Bay Packers, even in admittedly not the greatest of seasons. But yeah, let's get to it, man.
Yeah. So as always, every single week we start here just by doing a little bit of like a catch up and a look see around kind of the conference, especially. This week was kind of a funny one especially for our division, right? I mean, the Lions have kind of started to go on a little bit of a tear here. They're kind of picking up a little bit, and
that was
it's
a
always
good game.
Yeah,
that was the only game I got to watch because that was the only noon game that was on our local stations, and that was a good game. I don't know if you guys got to watch it or not.
Oh, I bought Sunday ticket, so I'm certainly getting my money's worth on that front. But yeah, I got the Lions and Vikings. I got some Eagles and Giants throughout the course of that, but it's fun. The Lions, I'm on Ross St. Brown's on my fantasy team, so I watch them by extension. Jamal Williams, friend of GameOn Wisconsin, my favorite player in the NFL. So I root for him. Root for him when he's not playing the Packers. Aiden Hutchinson, the best Michigan player I ever saw in his prime play. So
okay, now I got to take a timeout on that because obviously we got a lot. I mean, we could do a whole nother episode of a podcast over this because you're Michigan, I'm Iowa.
How'd last year's Big Ten championship game go?
Yeah, we don't talk about that one too much. But the big question is what the hell is Cade McNamara thinking by going from one program that didn't use the quarterback to another program that doesn't use their quarterback?
Yeah, I can't speak for Cade. Obviously, I'm speaking like I am friends with him, but I don't know. I think that when he came in this year, last year, obviously, Michigan won the Big Ten for the first time in 18 years. It had been since 2003. They beat Ohio State for the first time in 10 years. And he was rock solid, solid if unspectacular. I will say from Iowa quarterbacks that I've seen that they've had in recent years, Nate Stanley and whoever those bums were that they trotted out there this year, like he's better than all of those dudes.
Right.
I'm not sure what his thought process was. I know he had some quote the other day saying, "Please think we're still going to be a crappy offense." He said something else. I don't know. I think that he wanted something similar. He's from Vegas, so maybe he didn't want to go back out there. Maybe he wanted to stay in a program and have a shot to play Michigan. Because, that's the other reality about his situation was he was the quarterback who won the Big Ten for the first time in 18 years. And then he came back this year and got benched. So, that certainly is something. It was the right decision. J.J. McCarthy is much more talented than Cade McNamara. But when you're Cade, I would certainly understand feeling slighted by that.
I got to wonder if he's kind of regretting it now after all the guys that are jumping from Iowa into the transfer portal because they've lost two of their top receivers or two of their young up-and-coming receivers.
That's 2 in 2 years because that kid from Purdue, that
Charlie Jones. Well, actually, two of them ended up at Purdue, Charlie Jones and Tyrone Tracy. But we lost Arlen Bruce, Keegan Johnson. There was a running back that Iowa lost, but he kind of like Cade did, lost his spot to a couple other more talented guys. And, Arlen was supposed to be the second coming of, and Keegan was coming into his own. And you got to wonder if Cade's kind of regretting it now that, hey, these guys are leaving when I'm just showing up, and Iowa doesn't have much else sitting down there. So I don't know. It's crazy. It's going to be interesting.
And their tight end is going to be a Green Bay Packer by this time next year. So
I'm going to say he's going to go, and we can put this down as like Joe's prediction. He's going to go in the 5th round, just like George Kittle did, because the big knock on him is, at least in my eyes from seeing week in, week out, is he's not consistent with his hands. And I think he'll go in and I think he'll tear up the combine just like Kittle did. But I still think he's going to fall to that mid-round range just because they're going to question his hands.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you a name for Iowa to keep an eye out for then, and it's Tyler Ellsbury. That kid's going to be a really good offensive lineman for you guys at some point if he sticks around.
I don't
know.
Tyler
Ellsbury.
They're all skipping out, though, because right now we're worried about the top 5 guy out of Southeast, or I mean the 5-star out of Southeast Polk, that Caden Proctor. He's taken other visits after verbally committing, so there might be an opening for him.
There you go. Well, Tyler is, I believe he'll be a sophomore next season. I think he was a redshirt freshman, so should be a redshirt sophomore. But I've known him since he was
Kirk.
like 10 years old. So, yeah.
Doesn't stop Kirk. Kirk will go out there and recruit him as a sophomore.
There you go.
So, sorry, Nick. That was a little bit of our little side corner here because, we don't have that much back and forth on Twitter, so we got to do it somewhere.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, let's do Packers, though. That's why the people are here, right?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well,
sorry, I think, Packer Nation.
Yeah, well, I think, speaking of former Packers, I mean, Joe's number one biggest crush of the season before he left, Amari Rodgers, popped off for, was it, a touchdown, 50 yards, was it 4 catches?
4 catches, 57 yards with 1 touchdown, and it's his first career touchdown.
Yeah,
no,
I mean,
come on now. I'm not the number one fan. I just was not ready to give up on the guy.
I saw Jacob kind of talking about this a little bit. We've talked about this before. There's 2 camps of thought when it comes to Amari, and that's one is he was just not utilized properly, and maybe he's going to be a great player, but the Packers just didn't support him enough. And the other train of thought, which is kind of what I think, is that he just didn't show enough to really get those opportunities. He didn't earn them. And I mean, look, either way, he's a former Packer. I'm going to support him. He's such a lovely guy, and he has a connection with Randall Cobb, and it's nice to see him doing well. But I'm not like wistful and missing him and like wishing that we never released him. I mean, where are you at with this, Jacob?
No, I said last year, I remember after the Lions game, the season finale, that you could make a case that the Packers should build their roster for 2022 as if Amari Rodgers wasn't on it. Never showed any flashes as a Packer that says I'm an NFL player. Showed plenty of flashes that says I'm not an NFL player. Never looked comfortable return. I was at his first preseason game, and I remember noting that he looked like Peyton Manning in the pocket, where if you're chopping your feet underneath you trying to catch a punt, that tells me you're not comfortable doing that, which is odd because he had experience doing that in college. So this idea that the Packers did him wrong by making him a punt returner because it was something he never did is wrong, because he had done it before. He just didn't do it well in the NFL for whatever reason. And the other thing is I made note of, if you're going to play him, which the idea was give him a chance at receiver. Okay. Over who? Alan Lazard, he's not better than Lazard. Randall Cobb, he's not better than Randall Cobb. Christian Watson is I think he's in the Hall of Fame already, so there's that. Romeo Doubs, when he's healthy, you're not playing him over that. People say Sammy Watkins, but Watkins and Rodgers played 2 different positions, for one. And secondly, he had just as many career fumbles as he did catches in his time in Green Bay. So if he's fumbling the ball as a punt returner, why am I going to manufacture touches for him on offense when there's a pretty good chance, based on what we've seen, he's going to fumble? The kiss of death for Amari, and when I figured out it wasn't going to work in Green Bay, for sure, was when, I think it was early in the season, Matt Schneidman of The Athletic asked a question about Amari Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers was just yeah, he's returning for us. That's all I got. Okay.
Yeah, the infamous quote.
Rodgers, here's the thing. Rodgers gets a lot of crap. I don't have the more technical term for that, for the way he speaks about players, but he'll tell you if somebody's good. Pat McAfee, he'll tell you when he's oh, Christian Watson, even when Watson hadn't done this yet, he would note how he'd go back through the film and still see Watson being open to potentially make plays if he's in the progression, or, just whatever reason they didn't hit on something or whatever. He'll also tell you when he thinks a player stinks. But he's not going to say players are good or bad. He was complimentary of Romeo Dobbs. He was complimentary of Samori Toure eventually, after he was calling him Captain Casual.
Oh, we don't want to talk about that because I'm so pissed off with that. Oh, sorry.
That's fine. But I mean, he's complimentary of players like this notion that Aaron Rodgers only cares about his friends on the team or whatever, I think is an easy boogeyman to point to because the offense stinks. But that's not why in my opinion, that's not why the offense stinks. And that's a whole episode in itself of why the offense has failed for the most part in 2022. But no, they don't miss Amari Rodgers. Amari Rodgers has been gone for a month. Yesterday was his first catch in Houston. So I did find it humorous. These people that were taking a victory lap on, see, I told you they should have played him at receiver. It's hey, okay. So let's extrapolate that. He's been gone for a month. Let's say it's been 4 games. He averages now 1 catch a game. They just all happen to come against Dallas in 1 game and he scored. And I don't know. There's no fan base I've seen that cries over spilled milk like Packers fans. That guy's gone. I remember a few years ago when they had Travis Fulgham in training camp.
Yes. I was going to mention that. Exactly.
And they cut him. And now everyone was like, oh my God, look at this huge mistake they made. He's balling out for the Eagles. And where's Fulgham at now? Does anybody remember? Oh, that's right. He's on the Packers practice squad. I sincerely think that, when we look back on everything, and maybe it won't be right. I'm not rooting for Amari Rodgers, but I'm not rooting against him either. But I think when we look back at his career, we'll be like, yeah, that was the best game of his career.
Yeah, it's quite possible. Yeah.
And I know it sounded like I defended Amari Rodgers every time we turned around, but it was just more that when they're on the team, it's hard not to support them because we always say, once you wear the green and gold, you're family. Well, you got to stick with the guy if he's on the team one way or the other. And I honestly don't think he did get a fair shake on offense. Now, I understand, punt returns, kick returns. Yeah, he should have been booted off of them a long time ago. But I would have rather seen a little bit more out of him in the offense, especially when guys were going down with injuries. We lost Romeo, we lost Cobb, we all lost those guys for a couple weeks, and we still weren't seeing a lot of, snaps out of him. So
kind of tells you something, though, does I mean, not that LaFleur and Rodgers and Steno and all those guys, they could very well be wrong on stuff. They started Jake Hansen, for God's sake. But,
right.
I mean, doesn't it kind of tell you something that now for 2 years, Randall Cobb was injured both years he's been here, and Amari's never taken a role in the offense.
Yeah. Well, and last year was kind of hard because he kind of went the AJ Hawk route where he took some bad advice and really bulked up before the draft, and it zapped a lot of his stuff to where he came in heavy, he came in slow, and all that stuff. So, this year he talked about how he was working with guys, he dropped the weight, he was putting in the work with the Olympic speed coach and stuff like that. So, I don't know. I would have loved to seen a little bit more out of him, but again, I wasn't going to trash him. I mean, yeah, I was angry with him just as much as everybody else was with the punt and kick returns. But again, I view it. We always talk about how we talk about how the Packers are a family, fans and players and all that stuff. So I don't know. I wasn't ready to, completely, want to kick his ass and throw him in a dumpster, but I can understand what they were doing with him, if that makes sense. I know I'm rambling.
No, I think, I mean, look, best wishes to him, but I'm not sure that he's gone. I mean, it's whatever. The last thing I want to talk about here before we kind of get into the meat of this episode is just, we're still technically in the mathematical race for the playoffs, right? And
our percentage actually went up too.
It was, I think, but prior to this weekend, it was 9% or 8%. Went up to about, I think, I saw 11.4%. It kind of changes depending where you look.
I think Schneidman said 11.6 or something like that, but I could be completely wrong.
Right. And so I kind of went into the playoff calculator, played with a few different things. And, so if we win out, we have the Rams, the Dolphins, the Vikings, and the Lions. If we win out against all those teams, we have, roughly 53% chance to make the playoffs. And, you know, the teams that we're kind of looking to compete against, hypothetically, you know, the Giants, Seahawks, the Lions, and Washington. I mean, look, like it's it's such a long shot, and you know, it's like if this goes right and this goes right, maybe we get in. But I mean, if there is a scenario where the Packers do get into the playoffs, I mean, do you see the Packers having any shot of beating any of these teams?
Well, as of right now, if the season ended and the Packers got in, let's just say like everything breaks right, that means Green Bay's the 7 seed. Right now, the 2 seeds, the San Francisco 49ers. The Packers can't beat the 49ers when the 49ers are worse than they are. Here's the thing. I'm going to root for it. I root for winning. I'm a believer that winning is a culture, winning is a mindset, losing is a mindset by extension. So I'm not rooting to tank for a draft pick. I think that one of the worst things about I call this the trust the process era of sports, essentially derived from that Philadelphia 76ers team where people were actively celebrating them being terrible and making a complete mockery of sports and competition. And it happens now, I think, more in all the sports. Like you watch Major League Baseball, there are teams actively not trying to compete to win, which is supposed to be, and we're talking for years, like the Houston Astros are a modern day dynasty, and that's how they were built. Sure. But they're also kind of the exception. Like the Orioles have been tanking for years.
I don't know if that's still tanking or not, or if they're just a shitty team.
Well, they were a little bit better last year, so I will give them that. But I mean, there are teams that have been the Pittsburgh Pirates for years. They've been terrible. Like I don't do that. I don't like it. You know, some of that I can make the joke of it doesn't really matter where the Packers pick because do you really trust Brian Gutekunst anyways? Maybe you still do. I think there's at least a fair question on that shake. The thing about this team is, so coming into the year, I don't know what your guys' expectations were. My expectations for the team was I didn't think they were a Super Bowl contender. I didn't think that when everyone was healthy. I had them winning 11 games and losing in the first round of the playoffs. I have that written down. That's the only reason I really remember that. But I had them winning 11 games, winning the division, and losing in the first round. And I basically did that because I didn't think Minnesota would have a horseshoe jammed up their ass all season when it came to sheer dumb luck. The Lions I still thought would suck. They don't. And the Bears I thought were terrible, and they are. I just didn't anticipate quite this level of inconsistency from the Packers on offense. I thought they would be good enough on that side of the ball, and they really weren't in the first half of the season. And I never thought this defense was going to be great. I think the biggest mistake that the Packers fans, media, followers, everything around the team did was buy into a defense that was not good last year. I don't care I know how they finished. They finished great, but game to game, they were not good. They finished poorly. Sure. I think they were ranked 23rd in Football Outsiders defensive DVOA. That's the bottom third of the league. Like they were not good last year. The only thing they added to that defense was Jerron Reed, who's a nice rotational player. Quay Walker, rookie. Devontae Wyatt, rookie. So like expecting much more out of that, especially when you consider the high variance of Rasul Douglas and Dre Campbell potentially being one-year wonders, and it certainly looks like that was the case. For both of those guys have been fine, but neither one of them as good as last year. They're just not good enough. Like that's really what it boils down to. I will root for them to make the playoffs, and I'll root for them when they get to said hypothetical playoff game. But I very much believe if they played Philadelphia, San Francisco, even if they played that Dallas team again, the only reason I would have faith against Dallas is because of the Aaron Rodgers voodoo magic against the Cowboys that he seems to have. But I think all three of those teams in a normal setting and a normal game, if they played each other 10 times, would bash the Packers' skulls in, especially as this team, the health situation, it's actually getting better on offense, but it's likely to continue to decline. You know, the Rashawn Gary injury is one that is very hard. It has been very hard for them to overcome. I don't think they'll be able, obviously the defense is terrible, so they're not able to overcome that. So I root for them to win. I certainly would. And I think they have a good shot to win 3 out of those 4 games that you just mentioned. I have a hard time seeing them winning in Miami on Christmas Day. But
that Florida curse.
The Florida curse, they could beat Minnesota at home. Like I wouldn't pick them to win either of those last 2 home games either, though.
Yeah.
Because Minnesota was better. And people will be like, well, it's hard to beat a team twice. And I understand that. But Minnesota is better than Green Bay is. And Detroit is better than, I didn't think I would ever say that, but Detroit is better than
it's
Green Bay.
Crazy, isn't it?
So yeah, it is. And I said, I just don't, this team's not very good. It's fun. And I know that we're kind of riding maybe still a little high off the fact that they beat the Bears a couple weeks ago. But I mean, they played like crap and beat the Bears, and like it still took everything for them to beat Chicago. So I don't think they're very good. I wouldn't be surprised if they beat the Rams, but I wouldn't be surprised like if they lost to them either.
Yeah.
To go back to kind of what you said about you didn't know what we thought of the team going into the season. I'm always okay, we're going to the Super Bowl type guy. Just because that's, why not? Any given Sunday you can have that, that can happen. But I think my fault was I bought into the hype on the defense. We only lost one main starter on defense and we're returning the full team, and we're going to do better and, all that stuff. But I thought we were going to have a hard time on offense just because, Devontae wasn't there anymore. We were going to maybe return Bach, who knew, maybe return Jenkins, who knew. So I really thought that the offense was going to struggle while the defense was, dominating. Well, boy, was I wrong on that shit, huh? So, I mean, the pieces are there. I don't know if it's as simple, and I've been seeing it now week in, week out, fire Barry. I don't know if it's as simple as getting a new defensive coordinator in there to fix it. It's not going to, it never is, but it's not going to hurt it. I mean, I could see them cutting ties with him, but I could also see them keeping him just because, he's the LaFleur guy. And we know how the Packers like to hang on to guys longer than they probably should have. Pettin and Capers and guys like that. But I mean, I know a lot of people are saying they don't want to in-house hire either. But I wouldn't be opposed to letting Jerry Gray get some time as a DC. I mean, he's got experience at it. He's been pretty solid as a cornerback or, as a DB coach. I mean, yeah, the safeties haven't been great this year, but, he's pretty much the corners have been pretty solid up until, Stokes regressing in his second year. But, and I don't think it's going to, this is another one I'm going to make a prediction. I don't think it's going to be a Jim Leonard hire. I know a lot of Badger fans are really wanting or riding the Jim Leonard train, but I think he had his chance and he turned it down. And I think the Packers are going to look elsewhere if they do fire Barry. So the offense has been surprisingly better than what I thought it was going to be, which is scary to think that it's not even been that great. But, and I know Nickel is going to talk an hour about Christian Watson. So,
but deservedly so, though, because when you look at, I mean, and there are stats, numbers, a bunch of stuff, the Dusty Eveleys and Ross Uglums and all those really smart people of the world.
Of course, Ross.
There are things to back that up, too. The Packers offense is so much better when Watson's able to play. And now that it's not even just as a decoy, but as a, like, what did Rodgers say last week, is a high-level game-breaking player. And, like, that's something that, I mean, seriously, Devontae is the best receiver I've ever seen play in Green Bay. And when's the last time you think Green Bay has had a player that, like, anytime he touches the ball, you're like, he might score? Like, Devontae was awesome. He wasn't that. And that's not to say Watson will even end up well, I feel pretty confident saying Christian Watson won't end up better than Devontae Adams, because that's a very, very high bar to clear. Good for him if he does. But this offense is so much better with Watson, not just on the field, but now making the play. And he's still going to have his struggles. He's a rookie. So we're going to ride that wave for a little while. But it is nice to see, because especially you want to talk about a guy who didn't get a fair shake at the beginning of the year just from sheer dumb luck, bad luck, frankly. Yeah. Gets injured, misses camp, first play of his career. The entire world is watching. It's America's game of the week. He drops a walk-in touchdown. And then he's in and out of the lineup for the next month and a half with injuries. and I always say this, like it's rare that you can like see the exact turning point of maybe a player's career, certainly his season. But if you stop the game after the first quarter against Dallas, Watson has 2 drops in the first quarter. One of them, maybe I'm being a little tough and grading one of them, calling it a drop, but his hands were on and he should have caught it.
Tough catch, yeah.
Contested catch he didn't make. If you pause the game right there, you're thinking, man, like Watson's the only time we've asked him to do anything as a receiver, he's dropped the ball. Like not in a figurative sense, quite literally has dropped the ball. And then the rest of that Dallas game is history. Like the deep ball over his shoulder, bang, like complete turning point of his season and maybe his career. Like that's where the Packers offense has changed. And ever since his emergence, I mean, Green Bay has started scoring a lot more, but they had one bad game against the Titans, which that was for a variety of reasons. But I think they've done much better since Watson's emerged. 30 against Dallas, scored 28 last week against Chicago. You know, they've played really good football on here. They scored 30 plus, and that Eagles defense is really good. So scoring 30 plus on them isn't exactly an easy accomplishment, and they found a way to do it, even with their backup quarterback, which I'm sure we'll talk about as we get to here.
Yeah, and by pure points per game, since Watson's emergence at the Cowboys game, they've actually been 4th in the league points per game. So yeah, they're doing absolutely fantastic, and obviously it's quite difficult to extrapolate that to a full season. But I mean, it's what you want to see. You couldn't really ask for more. And your comment about him being as good as Devontae, the beauty of that is that he doesn't need to be as good as Devontae, because the pure the raw ability and this nature of him being on the field just adds so much to the offense. It's everything that you wanted to see out of him.
Sterling Sharp. You asked the last time that you about a receiver that you knew was going to score when he got the ball in his hands. I had to sit here and think. I was right. Didn't you see the smoke coming out of my ears on that one? I really had to think on it, and I would have to.
Old, but that could be.
Thanks a lot there. I already have all the gray in my beard. I might as well be playing Santa Claus. But I'd hate to say it, because they're 2 different body types, but yeah, Sterling Sharp would probably be the last guy that you could make a case for that was the last guy that we had that played similar to Christian Watson. And I will admit, and I've admitted it several times on here, that when the Packers drafted him, I had question marks on him, like everybody else, because there wasn't a lot to him at North Dakota State. They didn't ask him to run a sophisticated route tree. He wasn't called upon to make these plays. He was the gadget guy, and he had a lot of raw talent. But the one thing that I kept saying is if he could learn the route tree and become, get polished with his routes, he could be the next, top 5 receiver in the league. So I'm happy. I can't wait to see him and Dobbs back out on the field together.
Yeah, I think it was. I can't remember if this was Andy Herman or Peter Bukowski, but one of those top dogs as far as Packers podcasting goes said once that if every receiver in this draft class, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, you name your guy, if every single one of them hits their ceiling, Watson's the best one. And that's and now that doesn't mean they're all going. But they're certainly not all going to hit their ceiling. And Watson may not even hit his ceiling, but I do think you feel much better about it now than you did 6 weeks ago about the shape of Green Bay's receiving core, not just even now, but, moving forward. I've made the case of, say they want to run this thing back with Aaron Rodgers. If you bring in a veteran who's useful, which Sammy Watkins was not this year, do you find somebody that's useful, pair him with Watson and Dobbs, and let's roll? There's certainly a way for this offense to not just be good, but really good next year. I'm not necessarily banking on that, but there is a way. There is a way. Yeah, and sure. That's kudos to 9 because, the player is always the one who it takes a long time to reverse it. Because what did we talk about for the first, by we, I mean, I'm using collective we on Twitter. And I know that's not real life, but what do we talk about for the first 3 months of the season? Oh man, that could have been George Pickens. Well, Christian Watson's better than George Pickens right now. Now, maybe that will change throughout the course of their career, but Christian Watson's a better player. And again, maybe that'll change We got a long way to go, but I will advise and I beg of the people listening to the show, just please remember that a player's rookie season is not indicative of their entire career. And sometimes even a couple games in their rookie season is not indicative of their, like Devontae Adams. We rode the wave with Devontae, had a couple games his rookie year, New England, Dallas in the playoffs, but he had some other games where he was two targets, 0 catches, 1 drop, like nothing special. But the progression
I think
part,
that's the history of Packer receivers, though. They have a rough first couple of years, and then they click in that third year.
That could be receivers in general. Maybe less so now with the presence of like 7-on-7 football and the passing offense is becoming more sophisticated in college and stuff like that. But in general, like what was it? I think coming into the year, the leading receiver in terms of catches and yards was MBS because of with Aaron Rodgers. And that was basically because of necessity. Like there were games where MBS was the de facto number 1 wide receiver by the end of that season because Devontae was hurt, Cobb and Jordy were out, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, I'm excited to see their development, regardless of who's throwing them the rock, which is going to be a very interesting off. I thought we were done with this for a while, but apparently maybe not.
Yeah. And that could be a whole nother episode too on just talking about what Rodgers is going to do next year. So
yeah. Well, I mean, look. So we've already kind of like started to dip our toe into this, but let's talk about what we want to do, what we would like to see from this team in the off season. I mean, look, we've talked about the shape of the offense next season and kind of hinted at what might happen at DC, but something I want to kind of look at with the roster, right? I mean, we were all aware that 2020 was the all-in year, right? Like that was the year. 2021 was like an extension, like, that kind of stretching of the window, all-in resources, blah, blah, blah. We all know Ken Ingalls breaks down the Packers cap. For the next season, 2023, this was kind of 3 years ago was supposed to be kind of the end of this window. And in a lot of ways it is, but we're feeling the repercussions still of 2020 in 2023. Ken Ingalls is written down here. We're already $2 million over the cap for next year. By the time that we draft people and kind of fill out the roster, we're going to be $30 million over the cap. And that's before we sign any free agents or anything. So what I want to ask you guys, long answer, is how do you see the Packers dealing with this situation and kind of setting up the team in the way that they traditionally have going into 2023?
Yeah, I think that starts with the quarterback situation. That's the biggest question that needs to be answered. Are they going to redo that contract? Are they going to redo Rodgers' contract? Are they going to pick up Jordan Love's 5th-year option, which doesn't apply to the 2023 salary cap, but it all kind of ties together.
For sure.
What are they? And then you go in from there. Like if 12 is here, then yeah, you want to figure out a way to get Aaron Jones back in here because you're trying to win the Super Bowl in 2023. You want to keep David Bakhtiari on the team. You want to re-sign Elton Jenkins to that contract. You want to tender Yosh Nijman and run back that top 5. And you might want to do that part anyways, but there's, so let's be realistic. I mean, if Jordan Love is the starting quarterback next season, the expectation is not going to be to win the Super Bowl. That's not fair to him. That's not fair to the team. And the roster will look likely drastically different. This is where Russ Ball earns his money, as we've seen the last couple of years. I think the way that they're going to go is kind of the way they've done the last couple of years, touch contracts, move some money around as much as they can, do some stuff like that. But I do think that it's more likely that Green Bay is going to lose more players than what they'll be able to add. You look at free agency this past year, Jerron Reed was their biggest free agent signing of significance. They brought back Rasul. They brought back Dre. They were able to re-sign Preston Smith. But in the process, lost Devontae Adams too. So that was a really big piece that they signed Sammy Watkins too. So they were able to do some bargain hunting in free agency. What you're kind of hoping is if they can do that again, that they just kind of have better luck with some of those signings. Sammy Watkins was a zero. Reed wasn't, I don't think has been quite what they thought he was going to be. And frankly, do you get some better production in the draft and from the players from like Eric Stokes needs to play better next season. No question about it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Devontae Wyatt and Quay Walker both need to, and Quay has shown a lot more than Devontae just because of sheer opportunity, but that's a guy, Quay Walker specifically, that needs to play better next season. And they need some help, I know that when we get into the draft and everything like that, everybody's going to be saying the same stuff that we've said for basically since the day Aaron Rodgers asked to be traded. Receiver, 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 receiver. Well, I don't know how you watch this team and think that's their biggest need. Yeah. But, I mean, just that doesn't necessarily need to be the way that they draft somebody. But, yeah, as far as what to do with the offseason, some of those questions might get answered here in the next, 3-4 weeks. Because if they make a magic carpet ride run to the playoffs and win the Super Bowl, then the answer to your question is I don't really care because they won the Super Bowl. But since that's probably not going to happen, then yeah, there's a lot of question marks because this is a team that was supposed to they've pushed their chips to the center. They have mortgaged the future. Yeah. Gutekunst has talked about some long-term pain for some potential short-term gain. Absolutely. And that time is eventually you can manipulate the cap, certainly. But at some point it comes time to pay the piper, and that time is coming for the Packers. And that's, the biggest question, like I said at the top here, that starts with the quarterback. So whoever that's going to be, whatever that's going to be, that's where it all starts and frankly even ends to some degree too.
Yeah. The running joke we have on this show is that I think the minute Rodgers retires, the Packers will draft a receiver in the first round.
I hope they do. That would be hilarious.
But yeah, the thing that I gotta say is, they must have a plan in place somewhere because they kept saying that they offered Devontae the same contract that the Raiders gave him.
They did.
So if they offered him that, then they must have room in there that they know that they can move around because that'd have been hard to fit his contract in with what he got. So they have a plan in place somewhere, but yeah, there's a lot of money that's got to be moved. And
something to keep in mind too is remember the NFL is going to get a new TV deal,
right? And I was just going to say that
raise that salary cap. So I don't know when that'll take place, but the cap number, like Ken's numbers, and Ken's as good as you can possibly be for something like this. Ken's numbers are based on a projection. That number is not set just yet. That number probably won't change drastically, but I do think that TV deal is something that's going to kind of help Green Bay's salary cap situation. They'll still have to do some there are guys that this happens every year though. Guys are going to get cut. Guys aren't going to come back, whatever it is that happens. And they've got some relatively, Elton Jenkins, Alan Lazard, those are both pretty useful players. They're free agents. Those are guys, one of them, I don't think Lazard.
I've been saying all along that I think that they're going to pass on Jenkins. And I know a lot of people disagree with me on it, but my reasoning is I just think that with his age, not that he's old, he's not old, but by standards the Packers have set on themselves with their draft picks, he was an older draft pick than what they normally get. And I just think that I could see him pricing himself out of Green Bay. Now, it's not saying I want him out of Green Bay. I'm just saying that I think that he could probably price himself out. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. Now, the question I'm going to put forth to you guys, do you see maybe Aaron Jones doing what A.J. Hawk did there towards the end of Hawk's career where the Packers cut him but immediately, re-signed him for a better, a better team deal? Or do you think that, I'm going to put three options. Do they cut him like they did A.J. Hawk and bring him back on a cheap deal? Do they just cut him and, cut ties with him? Or do they restructure his contract? Because, let's face it, he's been pretty much the face of this offense for the last couple of years.
Yeah. Some of that I think has to do with Aaron Rodgers, what his decision is. Like I mentioned, if he's back, then you're trying to win a championship next year. If he's not, Aaron Jones's number is very high. I think it's around $20 million that he's owed next season. So that's a lot of money, especially for a guy who, Aaron Jones isn't old. I'm not ready to take him out back and old Yeller this thing, but he's aging as a running back. There is some signs of decline.
Let's face it, he's not the biggest running back either. So, there is going to be a little bit more wear and tear with him.
And he's had health issues during his career. That's kind of why when I know he's like the team's best playmaker, I understand all that, but there's a reason the team limits his touches because it limits his exposure because he's such a small guy. You can't take that, just pounding after pounding. On the other side of the coin, the Packers don't have anybody to potentially replace him.
No.
AJ Dillon is on the roster. He's a good player, not the type of player to replace Aaron Jones anyways. The offense would kind of fundamentally change with AJ as the primary running back.
Yeah. Take that back. There is a guy, and they just got to give him a chance. He's sitting on the practice squad. That's my boy. That's Tyler Goodson,
Right. Okay. Patrick Taylor's on the roster. They don't have a back that's overly explosive. I don't think to make that. And then you're talking about adding another. I don't want to, running back in today's day and age. Although the Packers have made it a priority, they gave Aaron Jones a second contract and drafted AJ Dillon in the same season, same calendar year. So that's something that happened. As far as what they do, I would guess he's around in 20, just because I think Rodgers is going to be the quarterback in 2023. So I would guess he's around. They try and find a way to make that work. And ultimately, I think we get so as fans, especially now, and there's so much information and everything, and it's all good, but we get so wrapped up in oh man, what's that going to do to the salary cap? I would rather root for Aaron Jones and not worry about that.
Right.
Sure.
They have guys that are paid to do that. So let them do that.
Just kind of looking at over the cap for Aaron Jones's number. For the 2023 season, if the Packers were to cut him, he's owed just a little over $20 million, but the dead money would be $9.5 million, and the cap savings would be about $10.5 million. Whereas if you waited until 2024, the dead money would be about $5.5 million, and the cap savings would be about $10.5. So
about the same savings, the dead money gets cut in half. Yeah, I don't know. I think that in a perfect world, you'd like Jones back, for them to draft a back on late day 2, early day 3, groom him for a year, and then go, the following year it'll be AJ Dillon and whatever guy that they draft, plus the, whoever the third running back is on the roster. Packers needed sure, that's whoever, insert whatever guy there. The Packers needed an influx of explosive players, and that was one of the unfortunate parts about Kylan Hill's injury and then subsequent release was another. They don't have players on offense that are explosive. Christian Watson, Aaron Jones, and that's about it. Romeo Doubs has a little bit in there, but not really. Cobby's still got some every now and again. The tight end position, I think we all run faster than them collectively. But
I don't know, man. I've got 2 bad knees and a bad back. I don't know if I'm outpacing anybody.
Robert Tunyon's got a bad knee and a bad back. Yeah, but no, I'm joking, obviously. But
I might be able to take Big Dog or maybe even Bach, but
sure, yeah. I don't know. But I do know that, like I said, the team, they need more players on offense that can. I'm not saying every player on your offense has to go, but think about how good some of them Chiefs offenses have been. When they had Tyreek, but they also had Mecole Hardman was like a role player. MVS is kind of a role player for them right now. But just how many guys they could just flip the ball to and watch them run, kind of thing. And as Aaron Rodgers begins to age, that makes things. Or even the touchdown pass that everyone's raved about for Jordan Love against the Eagles. It was an 11-yard throw. It was a nice throw, great play. It looked comfortable and everything, but it's Watson catching the ball and doing the rest. How many guys like that does Green Bay have to make off? Look at the 49ers. That's a great example.
Yeah.
Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey. Brock Purdy can throw the ball 2 yards every play, and they could potentially score on any of them just because of the ability that they have on some of that stuff. So that's an influx Green Bay needs, and it's unfortunate because if they do cut Aaron Jones, they go from 2 explosive players on offense to 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, but Green Bay is definitely the kind of team, especially with this Quay Walker pick that was so confusing. It is the kind of team that wouldn't surprise me at all if they drafted someone like Bijan Robinson in the first round. It would be so frustrating, but it would be such a Packers move that you'd just be like...
He'd be so sick. And I know that running backs first rounds, blah, 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 but he would be so good at Matt LaFleur's offense.
Absolutely. And that's the worst part is it would be so beautiful to watch, but the discourse of running back in round 1 in the top 15 would just be
Yeah, he better be like, I don't even want to say like Saquon because Saquon hasn't been worth that. But like, think like rookie contract Zeke. That's somebody who's theoretically worth that first contract, but it's not worth the second contract because Zeke hasn't been worth the second contract he got.
Yeah, and I think with this, like I don't know if you guys have like looked exactly into specific prospects or anything for this draft, but I mean, where do you guys like want to kind of aim these resources that we have in a year where we are kind of picking higher? We theoretically have more to work with. I mean, is there like a specific area you guys kind of really want to focus on in this season if you were the GM hypothetically?
Tight end.
Thank God I'm not the GM, first of all. When whoever you guys pray to, thank them I'm not your GM. Tight end is one. I wouldn't do that early. I kind of like the way the Packers do things, and last year notwithstanding, in the early rounds. I'm a big believer that the game's won on the line of scrimmage. The reason I like the Eagles as much as I do this year as a team is because I think on both sides of the ball, offense and defensive line, they're the best team in the NFL on the line of scrimmage. Yeah. And in this day and age of fantasy football and betting and more casual observers, which is a really good thing to have. It's good for the NFL. And it's good for things like this too, obviously. But I think that gets lost in the shuffle, that ultimately matters a lot more than the shiny objects standing. I've never seen a quarterback complete a pass on his back is kind of the way that I look at football in general. So I think it's a big man's game. So when you talk about needs the Packers have, everybody's going to mock Michael Mayer from Notre Dame to the Packers in the first round, or Quentin Johnston or Jordan Addison, or name your receiver, tight end, pass catching type of prospect. Pass rusher. I think the Packers have a need there. Yeah. Rashawn Gary blew his knee out. Preston Smith is, maybe he'll be here, maybe he won't. Like, that feels like a year-to-year kind of thing. Kingsley Enagbari's had a nice year, but he's a fifth-round rookie with limited athletic potential. And I think he's probably better as a rotational edge rusher, which is a good thing. But I'm also like a guy who, if I'm building a team, again, not to continue to point to the Eagles, but the Eagles can literally go on one series, Josh Sweat and Hassan Reddick, and then the next series go Brandon Graham and Robert Quinn on their edges. Like, they are legitimately too deep on every spot on the defensive line. That's how they won the Super Bowl in 2017. Like, they just exactly. Yeah. That's, I think, to have that and the Packers defensive line. That's another spot. Like, Kenny Clark is there. They drafted Devontae Wyatt, so he'll get a shot. But the rest of those guys, maybe Slayton's good. I don't know. Dean Lowry, Rockford, Illinois, shout out. But like, he's probably at the end of his road here in Green Bay, or maybe he's not. I don't know. But he's another guy who probably should be a backup. They need starting caliber players. And it's going to be frustrating because I know fans have talked about how they've spent so many resources on the defense and it still sucks. It's like, well, I understand that, but like, it still sucks. So that doesn't mean that doesn't mean you quit spending resources. Exactly. So granted, some of this stuff will change. Quay Walker, better year, second year, maybe Devontae Wyatt, better year, second year, hopefully health for Rashawn Gary for a full season, Kenny Clark playing better for a full season, but offensive, defensive line, and even like I said, even the offensive line, because there's some question marks there. David Bakhtiari, how long is that going to hold on? That feels like a week-to-week thing. Yosh Nijman's good, not great. Certainly not somebody that you don't look to upgrade from. Same's true of not Jenkins, but the other two guys on the interior. I wouldn't necessarily draft a guard or a center in the first round, especially in the top 15, but I don't think Josh Myers has shown anything to say like, yep, rock solid. That's our guy for the future. John Runyon's rock solid, if not spectacular. So it's a big man's game. So whoever, and just for example that I can give you guys, the last time before this time when the Packers had two firsts, when they had the year they took Gary and Savage, like they signed Z, they signed Preston, and then they drafted Gary. And I'm still trying to figure out a way for them to get Montez Sweat or one of those guys kind of like that. I just think that is a constant rotation that's needed, especially as this league continues to go towards throwing the football. You've got to have guys that can hit the quarterback or affect, what does Brian Gutekunst says, affecting the passer. Like, can't have too many of those guys. And right now, Green Bay has, do they have any right now? I mean, Enagbare, maybe Preston, kind of. Like, they just don't have a lot of guys. And like, I think that is something that fans and the Packers, quite frankly, have taken too long. And I remember it took them way too long to get somebody across from Clay Matthews. It didn't work until then they got Julius Peppers, and then Clay ended up moving inside because they had Julius Peppers. And so he was able to do that. But Kenny Clark, it's taken them forever to find guys next to him. I just would like to see them value that more and stop settling for what I've deemed like good enough. Like they've always said, oh, we're good enough on the defensive line. Like, no, be great. Like that should be the goal. Look at the teams that beat the Packers in the playoff, 49ers, Bucks, teams like that. Great defensive lines, great pass rushers, the best teams in the NFL this year, Eagles, Bills, great defensive lines, great pass rushers. Like that is how you build a great defense. It's from the front back. And the same is true on offense. It's from the front out. So if you're talking about how to use your resources, build the trenches, man, both sides of the ball. And that's the best way to do it, I think.
Bring in legacy Peter Skoronski.
That could be something, sure. I think it's December 13th. The draft isn't until April, whatever it is. So, I mean, there's a lot of time between now. I'm not saying don't pick small guys in the first round. Like if the best player available is Quentin Johnston, then yeah, take Quentin Johnston. This Packers team they're not good enough. Like what year was that? The year they drafted Eric Stokes. That year was like 2021.
Last year, 2021. Yeah.
Yeah. So that year they were good enough to where you could say like, okay, pick a player at a position because they needed a corner. So it was like, okay, pick a player at a position of need. They need to do that because the starter is Kevin King. Well, you need to upgrade from Kevin King if you can try and upgrade from Kevin King. This Packers team isn't good enough to do that. Like they don't have a thing where it's like, hey, if we just add Brian Brees from Clemson, we're set. Like that's not the case. Green Bay needs help. And like I've mentioned, both spots on the line of scrimmage, their linebackers are in good shape. Their corners, I think, are in good shape. Their safety position could use a makeover, so they could use a pick there, certainly. So I think it sounds boring, but like take the best available player, and maybe that means Michael Mayer, maybe that means a receiver, maybe that means something like that. But yeah, take the best available player when that time comes, because like I said, this is a Packers team that they're 5-8. I think they go potentially 1-3 down the stretch. That means what, 6-11? It's a bad football team. They're not good enough to say like, oh, just get this and we're good. Like last year, it felt like in the draft, we were like, pick 22, pick 28. Okay. Find one of them top stud receivers, use the other pick to grab, a pass rusher, and let's ride. Well, they didn't do that, obviously. And even if they had, like if I redo the draft and they end up with Chris Olave and George Karlaftis, like, do you really think the Packers are better with those two guys? Like, they might be better, but are they a championship contender with those two guys instead of Walker and Wyatt? Probably not.
Mm-hmm. The one thing that they need to do is just get rid of all their third-round picks.
Yeah, so my standing policy, and I have tweeted this, and you guys can check it out. My standing policy on third-round picks is they are either, number one, traded to move up in the first or second round. Number two, traded for veteran players at the trade deadline. Or number three, if you have kept the pick and exhausted every option for options 1 and 2, just pick a running back. Pick your backs in the third round because it's so hard to bust at that position. So they could just take a guy there. And
the Packers would find a way, man. That third round is
probably. So my suggestion is the knee injury will let him drop to day 2, the third round, and there you go. Plug in Blake Corum. So since you're doing your Iowa stuff, I can plug a Heisman Trophy candidate. There you go. Plug him in there. Grab a running back there. And that's the only running back other than Bijan Robinson that I know that's available for this upcoming year. So, but yeah, dump your third rounders as much as you can, and I can't stress that enough because I don't know. I thought Sean Ryan was going to be awesome and potentially start. And that not only did he not start, he was a healthy scratch. And then apparently he was using performance enhancing drugs, but whatever he was using.
They weren't helping him too well.
They were not working. No, sir.
Yeah.
The guy that I'm surprised that we haven't heard about, but then again, they haven't really need him, is the guy they took in the 7th round, Rasheed Walker, because he looked like he could be a diamond in the rough. But
legendary. There's a Twitter clip of him. I don't know if you guys
are yeah, I know the one. Yeah.
A guy with that set of stones on him, he's gotta be playing at some point.
strong hips, strong anchor.
So no, I mean, you pretty much said it all. It is an early look at the draft, and there's still a long ways out, and some guys will rise, some guys will fall. But one guy that you kept mentioning that I've been seeing in some early mocks is that Quentin Johnson.
TCU, yeah.
So
I look at him on New Year's Eve too. So that'll be.
I got to reading a little bit of some of these scouting reports they had on him, and one of the things, and I'm pretty sure it's him because I haven't really, like I told Nick when we were discussing topics for the off season. I don't usually start looking into players in the draft until after the season, just because that's when you start getting more of your film stuff put out there. But I did read a couple of scouting reports, and one of the things on the cons list was his blocking. And I said, well, that automatically kicks him off because LaFleur always, Packers always think highly of their wide receivers being blockers. They'd rather have them be blockers than pass catchers.
and they'll need to replace one because I am of the belief Alan Lazard is going to be a Chicago Bear by this time next year. So
I could see that.
It's too.
I could see him being gone.
Unrestricted free agent. I know they wanted to pay him. The Bears wanted to try and pay him and get him in Chicago last year. That was part of the reason. And this has been reported. This isn't me sourcing, quote unquote, anything.
Well, share your sources at some point. We need them.
Right. Yeah. Don't confuse me with at NFL Rumors or at NFL Sports Talk or any of them other fake garbage websites that we have. But I know that Chicago wanted him. And it just didn't work out. So I think if Getsy's still there, I guess if Getsy's not there, then that changes the outlook, or it can change the outlook a little bit, which I don't know. I don't know if Getsy will get head coaching looks. He did in Denver. We got the OC job in Chicago. Obviously the Bears offense had like a month stretch where they did relatively well, but they also still suck. So maybe not, I don't know.
I could see him getting a college head coaching gig.
He had one before. I don't know if he was a head coach. I think he might have been.
No, he was offensive coordinator at Mississippi State.
Yeah, maybe he wants to do that. He strikes me from when I'm hearing him talk as a pro guy, but maybe not. A lot of guys could be that. A lot of people thought that about a lot of different coaches, and we've seen guys go back. So who knows?
Yeah, or he'll just take the Denver job after they boot Hackett.
That would be interesting. That whole process is going to, because that's the thing is, so Black Monday is January 9th. For those not familiar with the terminology, I assume you are, but that's the day that after the season's over, coaches get fired. I just don't know how many guys are going to get fired. I guess some of that depends on how the rest of the season plays out, but Hackett feels like an easy one. Lovie Smith feels like not an easy one, but one that not easy, but more likely than not. Yeah. They're 1 and whatever. So you go 1 and 11 and 1 or whatever, then, I don't, if the Packers go 1 and whatever next year, Matt LaFleur gets fired. Like, that's just the way that it has to work. Something's not clicking if you do that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Every year there's always at least one surprise guy that gets fired. So, I mean, what was it last year? It was Brian Flores with Miami, or year before or whatever that was. And
yeah, it was last year because they hired McDaniel. But there'll be somebody, because somebody's going to fire their coach to chase Sean Payton. If Dallas is 1 and done in the playoffs, and Dallas is a team to me that I think Dallas could win the Super Bowl, and I think they could lose wild card weekend, and neither one of those things would surprise me. So if that happens, does Jerry Jones fire Mike McCarthy and bring in Sean Payton? I know that's been widely speculated for almost whenever Sean retired, quite frankly. I think the place to watch for Peyton is Los Angeles, the Chargers with Justin Herbert. So I think Peyton's going to try and handpick his quarterback, which is smart on his part because, I mean, head coach without a quarterback, not much changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the last thing I want to ask you guys before we just shift over to this Rams preview, do you have any names that you're watching for this DC job if it does open next year?
I'll go ahead and go first because I don't really have any names, but I've said for the longest time I would love to see them bring in a college guy just to get some new blood in there, some fresh ideas, because you're seeing a lot of the college offense stuff getting put into the NFL. So it would be great to, instead of having the old guard, some retread, bring in a college guy that knows some of the schemes that these new offensive coaches are bringing from the college ranks. So I really don't have any names. I know the obvious one would be with Packers fans and Badgers fans is Jim Leonard. We kind of talked about this. I don't think Leonard's going to come in. I think he had a shot, and the Packers are going to look elsewhere. Now, I could be completely wrong on that too, but my thought process is I would just love to see fresh blood, kind of like with the LaFleur signing at head coach. He kind of came out of nowhere as the head coach because nobody was looking at that spot, or looking at him for that spot. So my thought process is I would love to see them go against the grain and bring somebody in to bring that fresh blood in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my thing on coordinators is always like, you never know until you know. And I think they're the easiest scapegoats and fall guys. We talked kind of at the beginning. Yeah, not everything that's happening on defense is Joe Barry's fault. That being said, when your defense underachieves the way that it has, somebody gets fired. I know there's some speculation that like maybe Green Bay won't do that. But you're not going to make the playoffs. You were supposed to be a Super Bowl contender. Like, if all those things go wrong, somebody gets fired. Well, they're not firing the head coach. They're not firing the general manager. They just gave those guys extensions. Mm-hmm. You can't replace all the players. So the easiest thing to do is replace the coach. My take is similar to yours. I don't know if it's a college guy necessarily, but somebody who's the next guy? You know what I mean? Because Joe Barry was a veteran hire. Mike Pettin was a veteran holdover. Jim Leonard would have been a new guy to the NFL as a full-time coordinator. Ejiro Evero was another guy that would have been a new guy to the NFL had they hired him instead of Barry. I just think find one of those guys, find a guy from Salah's staff, find a guy from DeMeco Ryans' staff. Yeah. And that was something the 49ers did a good job with. When Salah left, they promoted DeMeco Ryans and their defense is better. Some of that is due to they have very good personnel over there. And when you talk about build, that was another team. I didn't even mention them earlier, but I mean, starting with Nick Bosa and kind of working across that front with Eric Armstead, they traded DeForest Buckner, one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL. And I'm not gonna say they haven't missed a beat, but they're still really good. So that's some of that's personnel related, but DeMeco Ryans was a relatively seamless transition and they've been better. Find that next guy, whoever that is, or dummy proof it and throw a bunch of money at Vic Fangio and see if he'll come over with his like other guy because he's an older guy. So you're going to want somebody ready for that transition. But yeah, I don't know the answer. I think schematically people are worried a little too much about like, oh, Jim Leonard's a Pettin guy. So do we really want him? Or, oh, this guy's a kid. Like all these guys come off the same trees. Every defense has its pros and cons. The Packers just need to find a way to play better. I do think that one thing, not to get overly like meatball football guy-y, but something I think that they could use is somebody to come in here on defense that brings a bit of an attitude with him.
Yes.
Something to say like, and I'm not saying you got to play, I know the common theory is like just play press man and everything will be fixed on defense. I don't think that's true. But if you stop kind of with this mindset of, if we just hold them to 24 points, Aaron will win the game for us, or Jordan if he's the quarterback. Like,
exactly.
No, like the guy that they bring on a defense has to be like find the guy with the same attitude as Buddy Ryan, or something to that effect. I'm not saying bring Rex Ryan out of retirement or anything like that either, but find somebody like that's going to instill this culture of we are the best unit on this team. Kind of similar to what the culture was that Zadarius Smith brought when he came over from Baltimore to come to Green Bay. And like, just this idea of like, I mean, the Packers defense was, and they were this offseason too, it just hasn't worked out on the field, but they were loud, they were obnoxious, and they talked a lot of smack, and then they would back it up for the most part until they had to play San Francisco. So figure that out. Find somebody that's going to demand physicality. Something that I very much appreciate about some of these teams. I always said the Packers are, this year's Packers especially, I can't remember a team that was less physical than this team. Like, the Packers have to put more priority on playing physical. And frankly, I know it's kind of an outdated concept, but stopping the run. The Packers defense has been terrible against the run for years, and we've kind of brushed that off as like, well, does that really matter all that much? Yeah, it does, because you got to be able to have team in order to get to third and long. You got to be able to get to third and long, so you can't give up 7 yards on first down on a run play. It can't be second and 9.
You've got to be able to stop third and long.
Which, when they're healthy, they have the personnel to do that. And if they add a pass rusher, like, that's how they're built. I understand that, but it can't be 2nd and 9 and then a draw play makes it 1st and 10 or 3rd and 2. Like, the Packers just, they don't have, and kudos to them. They were a little bit better last week. Well, not really, but I'm great. I'm grading them on a curve. I lied.
I was going to say, remember who they were facing last week.
Yeah, well, okay, so there's that. So I think that whoever it is that they bring in, I'd like them to bring in that attitude of physicality, toughness. Pull somebody from John Harbaugh's tree. Pull somebody from Jim Harbaugh's tree. Like, just that group.
We've got enough quota from Michigan. We don't need no more.
I don't even mean necessarily that, but just like guys. I
was just thinking, you mentioned the Eagles. They've had a pretty solid defensive unit. Maybe try somebody from them. I don't know who their coordinators are or their coaches are for the defense.
Yeah, Jonathan Gannon is their D coordinator. He'll probably get a head coaching gig, but there are other guys. I think that's never going to happen.
I think, kind of like you said, I think someone who's like has like a proven track record. I think with Joe Barry, the whole thing was like you can't lean on a quote unquote veteran guy who has like a complete dog crap record. Like, you can't. That's not really like a reliable way to go into the season. I think someone like a Brian Flores, I think, would be spectacular. Obviously, like you said, Vic Fangio would be great. Whether or not Todd Bowles gets fired and is interested in stepping down for a bit, once again, I think that would be a fantastic 1-year solution. It's just finding the next guy, the young guy on defense, I think is very scary to an organization like the Packers. And I think Matt LaFleur, who is still himself, I think, quite unsure in some ways of his own place in the hierarchy of that building. Sometimes I think he might, it might be a bit hesitant like he was in the previous coaching cycle to hire a younger guy. But yeah, I mean, especially someone like a Brian Flores would require more shuffling around with the personnel and that kind of thing. But I would love it. I mean, something I also find extremely funny is just you kind of mentioned this before. It's people who are so why does Joe Barry play so much soft defense? And, why is it always why do they always get away from the press man? And then they're like, yeah, let's get Jim Leonard in. Or let's get Vic Fangio in because that'll fix everything. It's this scheme is not the big separator between these guys. It's everyone in the NFL runs zone coverage the majority of the time. Mathematically, that's how it works in the NFL.
Here's a really good example too. So when the Packers played the Bears and Justin Fields' long touchdown run, Green Bay had it schemed up. Green Bay had a scheme to stop it. Yeah. Keyshawn Nixon whiffed on a tackle, and Keyshawn ended up having a great game. Good for him. But Keyshawn Nixon whiffs on a tackle. That's not a scheme thing. That's not a Joe Barry thing. That's eventually that's the other part where I say it's not just on the coordinator. Eventually, at some point, this team's got 1 million first-round picks and a boatload of money spent on that side of the ball. Some of those guys got to make some plays, and they haven't made enough of those throughout the course of the year. And they're not going to now because they're playing Rudy Ford's replacement level. I don't have to go through the entire defense, but that's where just the point I'm making is you could I had a coach in high school. I said, you could scheme it to death. Ultimately, the game's not played on the whiteboard. You got to play on the field. And the Packers guys, that's another thing. Unfortunately, haven't made enough plays. Not even that. The game against the Eagles, Jalen Hurts schemed up against Quay Walker. Quay whiffs, and Jalen's going to do that to a lot of people. I know that, but that's how it's schemed up. It's schemed up to where you have your guy on their guy. Yep. Theoretically, you should be able to stop that. They couldn't.
Yeah. I think, like you said, another example of perfect is Jair Alexander against Terry McLaurin, 1-on-1 man coverage. he just loses. I mean, it's just you can't scheme your players to just win. At some point there is the player's responsibility to perform.
And something that we've said over and over again is attitude. I mean, these guys look. That's why I've not had a problem so much with Jair's trash talk on the field. I know he's been doing it at some weird ass times and that, but there seems to be like no life in this defense. There's no attitude. There's no get up and go. They just look like they're going through the motions for the most part. So got to bring somebody in, whether it's a veteran player, like Jacob said, a defensive coordinator that will put some life back into this team and get them motivated again. So I don't know how much more we can say on it, just because it seems like we keep repeating the same talking points on the defense week in and week out. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah. So I think with that big discussion kind of, tied off in a bow there, I think we should, get into the last part of the show, just talk about this Rams game quickly here. The resurgence of Baker Mayfield in that kind of miraculous game where I think he was only in the building for 2 days, and it comes back to win it in the decisive 2-minute drill. This Rams team is kind of quite they're suffering from what you might call a Super Bowl hangover, right? They're and obviously Stafford being out for a lot of the season, that kind of thing, it doesn't really help. But I think they're kind of at the same level of the Packers. I think this could go either way. The way I see this game is it's just going to be kind of a good way to see how our young players kind of stack up against guys like Jalen Ramsey or an Aaron Donald, and just kind of just seeing the progress of these guys. I'm not really too invested in the outcome per se, but just kind of see how we perform and continue what we've been doing.
Well, we definitely don't have Devontae to burn Jalen again, so maybe Christian will step up and be the next guy to start burning Jalen Ramsey.
I've always not been I love Devontae, but I've always not been too sure if he was capable of fully beating Jalen one-on-one consistently. I mean, man, this game this past week was just brutal. I mean, you see several cut-ups of him in man coverage, and he's just not even in the same universe. It's just it was beautiful to watch, actually.
I'll be honest, I know he's a good corner, but I've never seen the top 5 hype out of him, because it seems like they talk about him being a top 5 corner and then he gets burned by a receiver.
No, Jalen is very, very good, and he has been extremely good. But
he is in my opinion, maybe not this year, but coming into the year, was the best secondary player in the NFL. The ability to play the boundary and the slot, that's not a common feature. Jair Alexander is one of maybe 5 players in the league that can do that too. Jalen does some safety stuff for them, et cetera, et cetera. He has struggled against Devontae Adams, but the other thing about that, I think we get tied into everybody's got to be Darrelle Revis to be a great corner. Yeah. And one, Darrelle Revis is a first ballot Hall of Famer. Secondly, even when Revis was in the league, it is harder to play cornerback now than it was back then. And Jalen at his peak was a physical player, slot blitzer. You guys might remember his rookie season in Jacksonville. One of the best throws of Aaron Rodgers' career. He's got Jalen Ramsey hanging all over him. That's something that I've always kind of admired about him. But I am interested. That's one of those things you guys talked about. The outcome, whatever. If they win, I'm rooting for them to win. Sure, if they don't win, that's fine too. But seeing how does Christian Watson do against Jalen Ramsey? How does Romeo Doubs? He should be back. How does he do against Jalen Ramsey? Does Aaron Donald play? Because he hasn't. Are they able to block up him on the interior with guys like Myers and John Runyon? I know Elton has had some success against him in the past. Is he able to do that again? The ramp, it's just so tough. This is a hard game to handle, because the Raiders had no business losing that game on Thursday night, and they still found a way to do it. God bless Josh McDaniels for not getting offered and not taking that Packers job, because I don't know if you guys remember that coaching search, but he was supposedly the leader in the clubhouse, off of the jump. It was horrifying.
Scary.
Yeah, that was my nightmare scenario. That would have.
Yeah, I know nothing. I know nothing, but I know I didn't want Josh McDaniels, so I was all out on that 100%, and it's turned out that way in Las Vegas. He might be. I don't think they'll fire him, but I guess that could be like a surprise guy. But anyways, looking at how do the Packers match up, because the Rams are kind of a skeleton crew, but how do they match up with some of these guys that are out there that are still stars if they're able to play? Jalen Ramsey certainly being one, Aaron Donald if he's able to play being the other one, and I think Baker Mayfield's as entertaining as a lot of players in the NFL. So obviously we saw him last year when he came into Lambeau on Christmas Day. That didn't go so well for him. He threw 4 picks. I don't think he'll do that again this time around. But I'll be interested to see how the Packers are favored by 7.5, which seems like a really large number. But then when you look at it, it kind of makes like the Rams. Justice Mosqueda said last week, like, this is a preseason roster. And it kind of is, just based on injuries and everything they haven't had. Like, they're missing, it feels like their entire offensive line, a bunch of guys on defense. Their quarterback, Matthew Stafford's not going to play. Cooper Kupp is their best player on offense. He's not going to play. So how do they do
against out?
He's washed anyways. But, yeah, Allen Robinson's not going to play. Like, how does Green Bay figure out, do they just kind of figure out a way to win against another team that they should beat because they're not very good? Essentially is what I'm getting at. But yeah, how does that work with some of our unknown guys against some of their known quantities? I think that's a big thing to keep an eye on for Monday night.
Can't say it any better than that. I mean, where's the game at? I can't remember. Is it at Lambeau?
Yeah, it's in Green Bay.
All right.
Sean McVay has never beaten Matt LaFleur.
Oh, I wish you
let's keep it that way.
You just jinxed it.
Listen, I'm 31 years old. I've seen the Cubs, White Sox, and Red Sox all win. The Red Sox multiple times, the White Sox and the Cubs once. I've seen them all win the World Series. Curses are not a real thing.
Don't say that when a pitcher's throwing a no-hitter in the 7th inning.
Not real.
But yeah. I mean, Jacob pretty much said all the main points on it. There's nothing really more to add to it. Baker's going to be the interesting guy. Is he going to play like that last drive and their win, or is he going to go back to, mediocre? I've never been huge on Baker. I thought he was probably the best quarterback the Browns have had in a long time, but that's not saying much because the bar was pretty low. But
he's better than a loser they sold their soul for. I can tell you that much.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, he's going to be the key. Is he going to come in and be like he was, like Jacob mentioned in the Browns game last year, or is he going to come out and just torch the Packers? I don't know. But
I mean, seeing our record with like backup and seemingly
yeah, the cursed backups
quarterbacks, yeah, it's not been great. So like with that, let's get into our guys for the game as you do every week. I mean, speaking of Baker, I think you should probably start with this one, Joe.
My guy for the week is I'm watching Baker Mayfield because, like Nick said, he was only in the building for 2 days before the Thursday night game, and he wasn't horrible, but now he's got another week in the system, and, again, like Nick said, the Packers seem to struggle against backup quarterbacks, and he would be technically the backup quarterback for the Rams at the moment. And so, that's who I'm going to watch just because it's going to be a 50-50. He's either going to do, torch the hell out of the Packers, or he's going to throw 6 interceptions in the game.
Yeah.
I don't think he'll throw 6 because we'll probably drop a couple along the way. But, my guy, I'm going with Romeo Doubs, and I guess I put in the caveat on if he plays. I assume he will. I think the thought was he was close in Chicago. They just wanted to give him another like full, basically 2 weeks off after all of that. But this was a guy who, if you go back to the beginning of the season, we talk about pausing seasons and stuff like that. After that New England game where he dropped a touchdown, but he also had a big play on a back shoulder touchdown from Aaron Rodgers. Like there was just a lot to like there from Dobbs. And again, he's a rookie. We're going to ride the wave with the rookie just like we will with Christian Watson. But I'm just interested to see. I think those two have skill sets that just work so well with each other, Watson and Dobbs, that is. So seeing now is Dobbs able to make plays in the intermediate parts of the field that, guys like Sammy Watkins or even, he's probably more dynamic at this point than Allen Lazard in his career. And how do they do that split in general? Because now Dobbs is back. Watson has certainly emerged. You can't take him off the field. Lazard and Cobb are solid, reliable vets. How do they kind of do that? Sammy Watkins has essentially been phased out of the offense, which is fine by probably pretty much everybody at this point. But I am curious to see just kind of how that split goes throughout the receiver snaps. You could see the last couple of weeks, like Sammy Watkins, 4 snaps and 7 snaps the last 2 games. Randall Cobb, they're kind of limiting his reps. That'll probably be the case for the most part. But I think that it's been basically Allen Lazard and Christian Watson as your main getters, and then a split between Cobb and 12 personnel, stuff like that. So I'll be curious to see what they do on that, but I'm looking forward to seeing him back on the field. It's been a while. The game against Detroit where he got injured, it was the first play of the game. They hit him on a dig route, and it felt like a game where they had a lot planned for Romeo on that particular day, and it just didn't work for the injury reasons. But I'm definitely looking at him, trying to see how that goes.
That's definitely a good pick. I really want to see what Dobbs and Christian Watson can do on the field together. And this will be one of the first major looks after the success that Watson's built up. So, one of them's going to open up the game for the other one because Jalen Ramsey may be a great corner, but he can't cover 2 guys at the same time. Although it is the Packers, and they'd probably find a way to do it. So,
Yeah. No, and I think one of the things I'm most interested to see is how these younger guys kind of handle a really physical corner like Jalen Ramsey. I think, one of the biggest questions about Christian Watson that we still, are still waiting on an answer for is how does he handle like an aggressive press at the line? Like how, with such a big frame, he's theoretically a bigger target. How does he handle getting knocked out of the way, his release? How does he kind of handle that? And same with Romeo Dobbs, he's probably a bit of a tighter route runner and probably a bit of a better release package than Watson does. But same thing, I think it'd be really, really fun to kind of see how they match up against such an established veteran like Jalen.
Who you got, Nick?
So my guy is Devontae Wyatt. I think, he's a guy that, everyone is kind of like, oh, his PFF grade is so high in the past couple of weeks, but he's only gotten like 3 snaps. I think in this week... I'm a guy.
Grades and this, that. He's taken 10 snaps, guys. Like it's a irrelevant sample. Like, his grade doesn't matter in 10 plays because if he has one good one, that means he has a good grade.
Yeah, it's the exact same thing with Amari Rodgers, right? It's like you can't say that he's like this fantastic player who's just not being used correctly. Also, if he's only getting like 3 opportunities in a game, it's like there's obviously a reason why this is happening, right? I think it'd be a nice opportunity for him to kind of go against a line that is not as tough as someone like Philly has been, right? Or even like Tennessee. Like I think, this him, maybe getting more chances to shine, hopefully getting more action, at least like 10 snaps to kind of fill in for some of these older guys. And, maybe if, God forbid an injury, things of that nature, it's like to see like more of a definitive flash because, he kind of has been doing well in this past couple of games. It'd just be nice to see, a definitive sample size.
I can go with it.
Yeah. I agree. I think Wyatt is something like I know I just rolled my eyes about PFF grades and stuff like that for small samples, but like the 3rd and 5 draw that led to the missed field goal a couple weeks ago in Chicago. That was Wyatt who made that play. Like there are a few flashes you've seen. He had a sack of Jalen Hurts that he just missed on. There are enough flashes that make me wonder why he's not seeing the field more. Yeah. And he was somebody I really liked in this class, so I hope to see more of him. So I'm definitely trying to keep an eye out for 95. He's definitely got some juice. And the Packers, I thought when Gary got hurt, you would see more Wyatt because they need pass rush, and they don't get a lot of that, but they haven't done that for whatever reason. So I'm with you.
They just keep trotting Lowry out there, and he's definitely not going to get the pass rush.
I think, and because like going into this draft, Wyatt was kind of my like fingers crossed draft crush. So I was like, now that he's on the team, I was wanting to see him do, like something more. So
I'll be honest, I had him off my list because he had some off the field issues, and I didn't think the Packers would take a chance on him. But so I didn't really watch him too much.
Yeah. Let's kind of finish up here with Joe's over and unders.
We got to get Jacob out of here so he can go take care of his kid.
Yeah.
He's got a mom.
I'm going to keep it lighthearted with the over-unders. I've got a bunch of them down here, and I know we try to keep them at 3. But with the way the Packers season's going, you got to keep some kind of humor in it. So I'm going to keep mine kind of lighthearted. I've been putting this one on here for every week for the last 3 weeks. So I'm going to keep doing it until we can finally keep track of them. But over-under 1.5 Santas in the stadium.
Over. Like,
I gotta go over
slam
as well.
Dunk. Over under 1.5 shirtless people in the stadium.
Well, that's definitely an over if they're in Green Bay.
Yeah.
But I mean, definitely over. I set it at 1.5 just because I haven't been keeping track of it during the games when I've watched. So, but with it getting closer and closer to Christmas, I definitely see a bunch of them. This one's not really lighthearted, but it's an easy one to answer because it's just a yes or no. Does Jordan Love get any snaps in this game?
No.
I think we're at the point where it's not happening anymore, barring an injury.
I'm just going to say yes to go against the grain. I'm going to say we rolled up on the Rams and we get pretty high up, just torch him, and Jordan Love will get some snaps towards the end of the game. And my last one, now this one I laugh at because it's the truth, it seems like, every time we play this guy, but 1.5 chokes by Aaron Donald.
Under. I just don't know if he's going to play, so I'm cheating, but under.
I feel like I'll go under just because I think we get 1. It always happens.
Always does. It seems like every time the Packers play him, he's putting his hands around somebody's neck. Maybe I said it a little bit high, but I'll go over. I'm going to say over.
Sweet. So I guess that's basically what we've had like on the program today. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about before we finish up here?
I'd just like to repeat that I really appreciate Jacob coming on and spending some time with us. And, it's great to have another voice in there to talk Packers football with.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me. The answer is always yes. If you guys reach out far enough in advance. So just, like I said, the answer is always yes. Appreciate you guys having me on. This is a good show. I had fun doing it. So hopefully we're able to do it again. Hopefully next time we do this during the season, the team is better than
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to throw it out there like we do with every guest that if you decide at any point you're like, hey, I want to jump back on with those guys, just reach out and send us a DM and, we'll get you scheduled in there somewhere.
I'm known to invite I had to invite myself to a bunch of parties in high school because I didn't have any friends. So no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sweet. So that's all we have for today, guys. Thanks for listening once again. As always, you can find us on Twitter, the podcast at @Outback_Packers. Individually, of course, Jacob at Jacob Westendorf, me at NicholasGRGR, and Joe at Iowa_Joe86. Until next time, see you later.